It's no secret that the US military is the strongest in the world. This is in no small part due to the huge amount of money America allocates to defense each year, combined with its commitment to maintain the world's leading fighting force. But other countries aren't standing still. Many, including China, have been working tirelessly to catch up. Just how close are some of its rivals getting in terms of matching the US in firepower and force? That's what we'll be taking a look at in today's episode of The Infographic Show. How strong is the US military in 2025? Let's start by seeing just how powerful the US military really is according to the numbers. Every year, Global Firepower Index ranks 145 countries based on their military strength. It crunches hundreds of data points, from troop numbers and military spending to tech, gear, and even geography, to figure out who is really on top. In addition, the Global Firepower rankings also consider the quality of the equipment. One country might have hundreds of tanks, but they might be outdated and surpassed by more modern machines. It's more valuable and important from a military might perspective to have the most modern and powerful equipment, not necessarily the highest number of weapons. That's why Global Firepower takes over 60 contributing factors into account to assess its rankings, looking at the finest details of each country's military to generate results that are, if not perfect, at least very accurate and backed up by multiple layers of data. Each of the dozens of factors is given a specific weighting and worked into a larger formula in order to calculate the final score, known as a power index for each country. And when it comes to power index, it's actually better to have a lower score than a higher one, with a score of 0 being absolutely perfect. At the top of the 2025 rankings, the US has a power index of 0.0744. Next in line, tied in second place, are China and Russia, both with a score of 0.0788. At the bottom of the list is Bhutan, with a power index score of 6.3934, and therefore the weakest military. Coming in right behind the US, Russia, and China on the 2025 rankings are some familiar heavy hitters: India, South Korea, the UK, France, Japan, Turkey, and Italy. These are the nations giving America the most competition on the global scale, so we'll break down how their military power stacks up against the might of the US Armed Forces. We'll begin with money. Money matters when it comes to military strength. High-end tanks cost millions to make, fighter jets cost tens of millions. There are personnel costs too. Every full or part-time military member needs a salary, a pension, and benefits. There are equipment costs, infrastructure, operations, training, research and development, and logistics. The list of expenses goes on and on. So if you want to build and maintain a truly powerful military, you have to be willing to spend a significant amount of money on it. That's something that the US has always understood. Over the years, America has consistently allocated a large part of its annual budget to defense spending. In fact, during the Cold War, some years saw between 8 and 10% of the nation's entire GDP spent on defense. That percentage is much lower nowadays, but the actual amount of money still remains exceptionally high and has been rising throughout the 2020s. In 2020, for example, the US spent $778 billion on defense. That rose to over $870 billion in 2024. We don't have the final figures for 2025 just yet, but experts expect this year's military spending to reach $895 billion, which is approximately 3% of the country's entire gross domestic product. To understand just how big that number is, take a look at how much some of the other countries are spending. China, for example, has a 2025 defense budget of around $245 billion. That is just under 30% of the US budget. For Russia, the figures are even more damning. The Russian budget for 2025 is capped at around $126 billion, barely 14% of the US budget. Those figures help to explain how and why the US continues to lead the way when it comes to military might. It simply spends far more than any other country. If you add up all the budgets of all the countries ranked 2nd to 10th in 2025 military spending, that's China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, the UK, Japan, Australia, France, and Ukraine, it will still not match the US's budget. What's more, in the years ahead, the US military budget is set to increase at a record-setting pace. The US president recently announced plans to approve a $1 trillion military budget in 2026, which could put the US even further ahead of its closest competitors, further cementing its status as the world's preeminent military force. So as far as cash is concerned, the US decimates the competition. But money is not the only factor in assembling a strong military. You need people too. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, medics, men and women willing and able to fight for their country, should the need arise. With that in mind, let's now take a look at the US's military manpower and compare that to some of the other major nations across the globe. We'll start with the total available military manpower. This statistic basically refers to how many people a country could theoretically mobilize in the most urgent of situations, like full-scale global warfare. The US could commit just over 150 million people to a war effort if it had to. That's a little over 44% of the entire US population. That's a big number, but it's not the highest, and that should not come as a surprise since the US is far from being the world's most populous nation. It also shouldn't be surprising that the two countries at the top of the list are the two with the highest total populations, China and India. India is just above the US in second place, able to commit around 662 million people. China, however, takes the top spot, believed to be able to recruit approximately 764 million of its 1.411 billion people to defend its land. If we look also at the fit-for-service population statistics for each country, the figures tell a similar story. This refers to the number of people in a country who are deemed to be physically able to fight or otherwise support a long-running military campaign. Those with older populations can struggle in this category, as their elderly residents may not be deemed suitable for service. However, those with large segments of the population composed of young or middle-aged adults perform better. As far as a fit-for-service number goes, China again tops the chart with around 626 million. Next, we have India boasting around 522 million able-bodied individuals. The US comes in third, with a still large but significantly lower total of around 124 million, just ahead of Indonesia in fourth with 114 million. If we imagine a theoretical scenario where countries were forced to call on all of their able-bodied residents to stand up and fight for the cause, the sizes of the Indian and Chinese forces would dwarf most other nations, including America. However, this is an unlikely scenario. Even if a full-scale world war broke out, countries wouldn't necessarily call on every man and woman to go fight for them. They would focus first on their active and trained soldiers who have experience and knowledge of warfare and know how to fight. So when we're looking at the real strength of a military force in terms of personnel, perhaps the most important statistics are active duty personnel and reservists. Active duty personnel refers to those who are currently engaged in military work as full-time soldiers and in other roles. These are trained members of the military. They understand military weaponry, equipment, tactics, and if a conflict were to break out, they would be some of the most important and reliable people to fight and defend their homelands. When we talk about reservists, these are also people with some sort of military background, but they're not engaged full-time with the military. They might have undergone training in the past, for example, or done some years of service and are willing to join the cause if the need arises. As far as active duty personnel go, the US can boast just over 1.3 million people. That puts it third in the global rankings, and once again, it's those two familiar faces taking the top spots, India and China. India ranks second with more than 1.4 million, while China's active duty total is notably higher at more than 2 million. It's interesting to note that the US also once boasted around 2 million active duty military members, but that was back in the 1980s. Those numbers have steadily declined over the years, but again, it's important to not just focus on quantity over quality. While the US no longer has the largest active duty force, it does have one of the most rigorous, high-performance training systems in military history. American troops are trained for everything from high-tech combat to elite special ops. And when it comes to units like the Navy SEALs or the Green Berets, they rank amongst the most highly trained in the world by far. When we turn to reservists, unfortunately this isn't one of America's strongest statistics. But this is more down to tactics and policy than anything else. Some countries have built their defense strategies around having huge populations of reservists. Finland, for example, has around 870,000 reservists in total, which is around 15% of its entire population. That means it can, if needed, call up a huge number of people to fight for their country or defend their land against invaders. This works out well from an economic perspective, as it means the Finnish government doesn't have to spend a fortune each year paying full-time military salaries. Several other countries follow a similar principle, like Vietnam and South Korea. The US, meanwhile, has historically put more focus on having a large number of active duty personnel fully engaged with the military at all times. Because of this, America can only boast of just under 800,000 reservists. That puts it in 10th place globally. It's way below the top spot occupied by Vietnam, which has a whopping 5 million reservists. Other countries near the top of the table also have many more reservists ready to fight, like South Korea with 3.1 million, Taiwan with 2.3 million, and Russia with 2 million. Though Russia's numbers are said to be dwindling due to its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Even countries that are significantly smaller than America, like the UK, have more reservists with 924,000. However, it is worth noting that arguably America's biggest military rival, China, has fewer reservists, with around 510,000. It's important, too, to look at how each country divides its active military members amongst its various forces and the relative strength of each of those forces. Battles can be waged in multiple ways: on land, at sea, or in the air. Some countries excel in one of those areas, but fall short in others, giving them some serious weaknesses in real-life combat scenarios. So how does the US measure up? Well, the United States Armed Forces is technically divided into 6 different branches. The 3 most important are the Army, Air Force, and the Navy. The Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard round out the set. The Department of Defense manages all of these branches, except for the Coast Guard, which is under the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. Let's look at each major branch. The Army is the biggest branch. According to the most recent available figures, it boasts a total of almost 453,000 active duty members, backed up by 325,000 National Guard members and nearly 177,000 Army Reserve personnel, for a total of almost 955,000. In second place, we have the Air Force, which has approximately 495,000 members, including close to 322 active duty members, 105,000 Air National Guard members, and around 68,000 Air Force reservists. Lastly, of the big 3, there's the Navy, America's seafaring military force. There are close to 337,000 active duty personnel in the Navy, with just 101,000 reservists, for a total of around 438,000. This is reinforced by the Marine Corps, which has around 168,000 as of December 2024, and another approximately 33,000 members of reserve personnel. While there are clearly many more soldiers in the Army than the other 2 forces, these figures show that America's military is quite balanced, with strong forces ready to fight on all fronts. While other countries typically have at least one military branch that isn't quite as well equipped or financially backed as the others, the US is second to none across the board. It boasts superior ground, air, and naval forces than almost any other country in the world. Let's now take a closer look at some of the actual equipment and the weaponry of those forces. We'll begin with the ground forces. On the ground, the US Army relies heavily on combat tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and multiple launch rocket systems. According to Global Firepower's data, the US has a total of around 4,600 tanks, with the M1 Abrams being the primary tank of choice. The M1 Abrams is a third-generation battle tank named after General Creighton Abrams, who commanded military operations back in the Vietnam War. It happens to be one of the strongest tanks in the world, boasting highly strong and sophisticated Choplin composite armor, an advanced fire control system, and a powerful 120mm smoothbore cannon. These tanks have been produced since the late 1970s, but they have undergone numerous changes and improvements over time to remain relevant and powerful in modern times. One of the most recent and high-end variants is the M1A2 Abrams SEP V3, which boasts stronger communications and networking technologies than prior models. There's also improved maintenance, better defenses against improvised explosive devices, and next-generation armor, among many other benefits. The tank is classed amongst the very best in action today, but other countries too have some top-notch tanks of their own. Some even have significantly higher numbers of tanks than the US Army. China, for example, boasts the biggest tank supply according to Global Firepower, with 6,800 total. In second place, Russia has around 5,700 tanks of its own, and North Korea isn't far behind the US with 4,300 tanks. Russia uses a variety of models. There's the T-72, which is its main battle tank. This isn't even close to the M1 Abrams in terms of offensive and defensive capabilities. However, Russia does have another ace up its sleeve, the T-14 Armata. Boasting an unmanned turret and state-of-the-art technology, the Armata was built to rival the best tanks that the US and other Western nations could muster. China, meanwhile, has the Type 96 and Type 99 tanks. The Type 96 is no real match for the M1 Abrams, with the M1 generally deemed to have better armor, mobility, and firepower. However, the Type 99 is capable of higher speeds, reaching a peak of 47 miles per hour on roads and 34 off-road. Meanwhile, the M1 has a maximum speed of 42 miles per hour on the road. The Type 99 can go further without refueling too. It can travel up to 400 miles in total, while the M1 has a maximum range of 265 miles. Still, in terms of firepower and overall strength, the M1 is arguably better. Thus, both tanks have their strengths and weaknesses, allowing them to excel in different situations. Germany's Leopard 2A7 Plus, for example, is often ranked amongst the best in the world, balancing firepower with mobility and cutting-edge tech. South Korea's K2 Black Panther also deserves a mention, with fourth-generation technology, unprecedented mobility, and a mighty main gun to rain fire on its targets. So while the US has a strong tank force, It's not exactly unrivaled. But how about armored vehicles? Well, America can certainly be proud of this aspect, as it tops the charts with a staggering 392,000 vehicles in total. That's higher than the next ranked nation, India, which has 148,600. China comes in third with 144,000, and Russia has 131,000. So even if you were to combine China and Russia's vehicle fleets, America would still have more. Of course, it's not just about quantity, as mentioned earlier, it's also about quality. So how strong are America's armored vehicles? Well, there are several different models in action today. Each one plays a distinct role. Some are mainly for transporting troops safely from place to place. Others are more offensively minded, fitted with powerful weapons to support tanks and infantry units in battle. The Bradley Fighting Vehicle, or BFVs, make up a large part of the fleet. Over 6,700 of these have been built, and they're not all used by the U.S. Army today, but they still play a big role in moving troops around and laying down fire on enemies with their 25mm chain guns and TOW missile launchers. They're capable of destroying most enemy tanks up to a maximum range of 13,000 feet away. Strikers are also a key element of the U.S. Army's vehicle fleet. There are over 4,000 of these in action, and they come in a wide range of configurations. Some are designed for very specific purposes, like medical evacuation of wounded soldiers. Others are more general purpose, used for reconnaissance, infantry carrying, and more. Then there are numerous other vehicles in use, like the M88 Hercules, which can tow damaged tanks away for repair, the M113 Armored Personnel Carrier for troop transportation, and mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs, which serve to protect infantry against hidden bombs and ambush attacks. By comparison, Russia has a large and varied array of armored vehicles amongst its ranks. It has the BMP series of infantry fighting vehicles to help with transport and fire support, and BTR personnel carriers. There's also the powerful and aptly named BMPT Terminator, which boasts strong, heavy armor and a range of armaments like grenade launchers and a 30mm autocannon to deal serious damage in urban combat environments. Some of Russia's vehicles are capable of matching their American counterparts, but the U.S. easily wins this category overall due to the sheer size of its vehicle fleet and its diversity. Unfortunately for America, things look a little bleaker when we examine the artillery statistics. There are several types of artillery, categorized into three main groups by global firepower: self-propelled, towed, and rocket. America has 671 self-propelled systems, putting it behind the likes of Poland, Turkey, and Egypt, and far below the two titans of the field, Russia, with over 5,000 units, and China with close to 3,500. In terms of towed artillery, America sits 8th in the rankings with 1,200 systems. That puts it behind Taiwan, Turkey, Iran, and others. Russia takes the top place with over 8,500 units, and South Korea performs strongly here too with 4,400. Finally, in rocket projectors, the US just barely makes it into the top 5 with a total of 641. That is far less than China's 2,700 and Russia's 3,000. So this is one area that America might be thinking about improving in the future if it hopes to match its main rivals. Now that's the ground forces covered. Let's take to the skies and explore America's amazing aerial superiority. With more than 13,000 aircraft making up the U.S. Air Force fleet, the nation absolutely towers above its rivals in the skies. Russia has just under 4,300 aircraft, while China has around 3,300. And when we look closely at the specifics of America's aerial force, we start to see just how strong it is. The U.S. is one of the only countries on Earth to have a dedicated bomber fleet. It has units that can drop both conventional and nuclear bombs, ready for any size and scale of conflict. There's bombers like the B-1B Lancer, of which there are around 45 on duty today, capable of carrying gigantic 75,000-pound bombs. The B-2 Spirits are another option the U.S. Air Force has, capable of dropping nuclear warheads, bunker buster bombs, and more. They cost more than $2 billion per unit, so there are only 21 in action. But that's more than enough to wreak havoc on any enemy targets. In total, America has around 140 bombers. As for jets, here too the U.S. excels. If you look at military expert rankings of the world's greatest fighter jets, the American Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II and the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor consistently rank at the top of the table. Lightning fast, super stealthy, and equipped with enough firepower to reduce almost any opposition to rubble, these jets are as good as it gets. The F-22 engines produce more thrust than any others in the world. It can fly more than twice as fast as the speed of sound, reaching heights over 50,000 feet and traveling over 1,800 miles before needing to refuel. The F-35, meanwhile, has a peak speed of Mach 1.6, which is about 1,200 miles per hour. It can carry up to 18,000 pounds worth of weaponry and is exceptionally difficult to spot on any enemy radar system. The U.S. Air Force boasts over 180 F-22s and over 300 F-35s. These are reinforced by other, cheaper fighters like 300 F-15s and over 700 F-16s. China's top jet, the Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon, is a reasonable rival to the F-22, and Russia also has an exceptional jet in the Sukhoi Su-57, but the overall Air Force strength of those two countries cannot match that of the U.S. Along with jets and bombers, the U.S. Air Force fleet also has many other aircraft. There are around 2,600 tankers like the KC-135 Stratotanker, used for refueling jets and bombers mid-air, and around 918 transport aircraft like the C-17 Globemaster III. America also has numerous reconnaissance and spy planes like the MC-12W Liberty and the U-2S Dragon Lady. Next up, helicopters. According to Global Firepower Stats, America has more than 5,800 helicopters, with over 1,000 attack helicopters. The figures for most other countries pale in comparison. Russia comes the closest, with over 1,600 helicopters and 557 attack models. China languishes behind with less than 1,000 total choppers and just 281 attack units. This gives America a serious tactical advantage. Helicopters are highly versatile vehicles suitable for a vast range of missions, including supporting ground units with aerial firepower and assisting with the likes of search and rescue, evacuation, and transport. That is land and air covered. Now let's take a look at the water. You probably won't be too surprised to learn that the U.S. once again leads the way in a multitude of key criteria when it comes to battles at sea. However, it isn't quite as much of a definitive leader in this field as it is in the air and on land. China boasts the biggest naval force on Earth, with an impressive tally of 754 vessels. This includes the likes of warships and submarines in various forms and sizes. America comes in second with 440 vessels in total. The difference is mainly down to China's recent tactic of heavy investment in its navy. The Chinese government has been pouring funds, manpower, and resources into building the biggest naval fleet on Earth. This theoretically allows it to reign supreme in the waters around Asia and beyond. However, if we take a closer look at their respective fleets, the quality and strength of America truly shines. The U.S. has 11 carrier ships, for example, which are absolutely crucial for carrying out long-running, far-reaching campaigns in waters around the world. These carriers can transport huge numbers of troops and, more importantly, aircraft for deployment anywhere on Earth. In contrast, China has just 3 carriers, though it is working on a 4th. Next on the list are India, Italy, and the UK, all with just 2 carriers each. Russia has only 1. The US ranks first for helicopter carriers, also with 9 in total. China has 4, and so does Japan. Russia has 0. Because of this, as far as logistics go, America rules the roost, or the waves, and it has the units needed to transport vast amounts of equipment, personnel, and hardware wherever it wants, and even China can't compete with that. Now let's look at the more destructive forces in the Navy, the destroyers. Destroyers are multi-role vessels boasting a rich array of weaponry and surveillance equipment to counteract forces on land, in the air, and at sea, even under the water's surface. And they're so advanced and powerful that very few countries in the world even have any. The US, however, is not one of those countries. It has over 80 destroyer-class ships, including the Arleigh Burke class and the Zumwalt class. This sets it far ahead of its next closest rival, China, which has 50 destroyers. Russia, the other major military force America is most wary of, has just 10 destroyers. Now let's dive a little deeper, quite literally, to look at the submarines. These stealthy vessels are so crucial in modern-day naval warfare, with some even capable of firing nuclear weapons. Unsurprisingly, the US has the most. The latest figures show a total of 70. The next closest rival is Russia with 63, and then China with 61. The quality of America's subs is also exceptional, with the likes of the Los Angeles class, Ohio class, and Seawolf attack submarines making up the fleet. The US doesn't exactly perform well in the other naval aspects. It has no frigates, for example, while China has 47, and countries like Turkey, Egypt, and Greece all have more than a dozen. In terms of corvettes, or light warships, it also lags with 26, which puts it in 3rd place behind China with 72 and Russia with 83. The US has 0 patrol vessels, which other countries use to survey and defend critical waterways and coastlines. China has a total of 150 of those vessels, for example, and Colombia tops the charts with more than 200. In terms of mine and countermine warships, too, the US fails to crack the top 10. It has 8 in total, while Russia sits at the top with 47, and China in second with 36. However, since the US military is so well-funded and proactive, plans are already in place to improve those areas. The US has, for example, started construction of new frigates and laid out plans to produce more corvettes to match its rivals. Overall, taking in the incredible amount of data, facts, and stats, it's easy to see how and why the US is such a titan of military might and still leads the way ahead of its largest rivals. While countries like China and Russia, amongst others, are catching up with America in certain aspects, they simply can't match the colossal amount of expenditure, cutting-edge equipment, and logistical superiority the US has. And that's unlikely to change anytime soon. With the US president promising an increased budget for 2026 and several exciting new vehicles and weapons in development, the US military is only going to go from strength to strength in the years to come. But what do you think? Can you see any other countries coming close to rivaling the US in military might in the next decade? Or will America continue to lead the way in this field for generations to come? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now go check out insane facts you never knew about the US military, or click on this video instead.